We just want to introduce Holden Karau right now.
So this workshop is effectively contributing to Apache Spark. I'm curious, how many people have used or know what Apache Spark is really well? Okay, cool. That's a good number of people. So this is a workshop format. So if you have a laptop, that'll be awesome, and you can follow along, and we can do some things together. But if you don't, that's totally cool too, and there will still be some useful stuff, hopefully. But if you have a laptop now, might be a good time to try and get on the Wi-Fi, because that'll probably take a while. Conference Wi-Fi is amazing. So my preferred pronouns are she or her. I'm a co-author of the Learning Spark book, and I have another Spark book that I'm working on with a friend. I'm a software engineer at IBM's Spark Technology Center, which is where I spend some of my time. If you want the slides from today's talk, I'll put them up on SlideShare. I don't know if the conference is also putting them up somewhere fancier. You can also follow me on Twitter for mostly pictures of cats and complaints about American healthcare. Cool, so what are we going to explore together? This is an adventure! Okay, so we're going to look at trying to get a change into Apache Spark. And if anyone is really, really super excited and drank a lot of coffee this morning, you might be able to get a change in during the workshop. But hopefully, even if we don't do that, we'll get you set up. And you can understand sort of how Apache Spark works, and sort of how that open source model works, and places where it also just really doesn't work very well. But it's being recorded, so that's cool. So we'll talk about how to find places to contribute inside of Apache Spark, and we'll also talk about sort of some of the different tooling for making code changes and the tooling involved for making documentation changes to Spark. How many people are interested in making code changes to Spark? That's, okay, 2, 3. Okay, how many people are interested in making documentation improvements to Spark? No one. Okay. Oh, 1, yay, 2, okay, 3. Okay, and for the rest of you, this will be a fun journey and adventure, and it'll be informative, but maybe not particularly useful. So there's a bunch of different ways to contribute to an open source project like Spark. The most obvious one that most people think of when they're thinking of contributing to an open source project is direct code contributions to it, right? And that, I spend a good portion of my time doing that. And it can be a really good way if you're using something like Spark and you find something and you want to fix it. And it can be really good. Another really awesome thing for developers is you can make a package on top of Spark. And this is one of the things that I do is I make a testing package so that people can test their code. Because despite my best efforts, I haven't convinced the Spark people that testing is important. So that lives outside of Spark itself, and it gets distributed separately. And some of the nice things about that are essentially if you are a little intimidated about interacting with a really big open source project, you can just go and make something on your own, or you can make something with your friends. And making stuff with your friends is really awesome. Some of the most fun I've had has been working on an open source project consisting mostly of really awesome people in San Francisco, and we just hang out and work on it together. And it's not great open source practice, but it's really fun. And I think fun is really important. You can also shave yaks. If anyone wants to go and shave yaks, you can go and fix bugs in the things that Spark depends on. There's a surprising number of them, but I'm not going to talk about it too much, but if you're interested in doing that, come talk to me and we can find some cool things for you to do. Documentation, you can give talks, you can answer people's questions on the mailing list or Stack Overflow, and this is really useful, right? Because a lot of people don't read really long books, I found out. They'll buy them, which is nice because I get money, but the reading part doesn't seem to happen after they've bought it. And so then they just run into a problem and Google it, and what comes up isn't a book, it's the Stack Overflow question asking it. And so you can just go ahead and answer the questions on Stack Overflow and help the community out. So what's right for you? I think direct code is cool if you are interested in doing something really like high visibility and you like writing Python code. I think the Python Spark people are really friendly and welcoming. And I think the other Spark people are also there. And you can contribute in other languages too, like there's Scala, there's Java. You don't have to know a specific language. There's even R now. Are there any R users in the house? Awesome. I'm going to try and trick you later into doing some work for me. Yay. So the biggest downside that I think happens with this direct code contributions to open source projects, like really big ones like Spark, is that it can take a really long time to get reviewed. And sometimes the review process can be really, really maddening. And we'll look at that in a little bit. But there's like something like 400 open pull requests and about like maybe 20 active committers. And so that ratio means that there's a pretty good chance your stuff might just fall through the cracks if you don't take the time to like network and business and essentially reach out to them and find a way to work together. I think building packages is cool because you get to skip the whole review thing and you can just do whatever you want or whatever you want to do with your friends or like boo. The one downside is like if you want to like try and improve something like core to the project, like if you want to try and make a faster scheduler, you're pretty much out of luck. You can't really do that in a package. And yeah, yak shaving is always fun and a good distraction from doing our real work. Documentation improvements are like super important because while people don't read books, they do sometimes read the documentation, especially when Google returns it to them as results for their stack trace. And you can do that, you can contribute that inside of the Spark code because Spark ships the documentation and code sort of together for the most part. It's in the same repo. And this has some pluses and minuses. It does mean though that like if you're interested in contributing code in the future, you can start with like fixing up some of the documentation and like the people that review your documentation changes are going to be the same people in the future that'll review your code changes, and you can like build a working relationship with them, and it'll be awesome. Yeah, you can always write books. If anyone's thinking about writing a book, I can probably dissuade you from it or convince you to do it depending on what your view is on making less than minimum wage. I think it's a lot of fun, but the money is like really not all that fun. But if anyone's like excited about writing a technical book, please chat with me. Okay. So there's like a whole bunch of really sort of random things about contributing to Spark. So one of the things that Spark wants to do is it wants to maintain binary compatibility between releases. And this goal isn't always met. But it's a goal, right? So it means that all of the changes that we make have to be the kind of changes that won't break the programs that someone wrote like in the last release. And this can be kind of constricting sometimes, right? Like this limits the kind of things we can do. If we change the meaning of something, we're probably not going to have a good chance of getting our code in, right? So you'll see a lot of times in Spark you have to do things like add a new thing and deprecate the old thing, and then like several versions later you can finally get rid of the deprecated thing. And you can't just be like, oh, the old thing was broken, I'm going to make it like work now. People might be depending on this weird broken behavior. It's not like quite as bad as like trying to ship like Microsoft Office or something like that, where like API compatibility is like the reason they exist, or not Microsoft Office, Windows, but it's cool. And if you want to make like really big changes, and I don't think anyone here is planning on like doing that today. If you are, you need a lot of coffee. But you should also reach out to the dev mailing list. And it's really good. There is a Jira system. Has anyone worked with Jira? Yay! Okay, so there's a Jira system, but it's pretty much ignored. Except for the part where like all of your issues have to be tracked in Jira. But like if you want to like make someone aware of what you're doing, creating a new Jira really isn't going to do it. You want to reach out to the dev mailing list so that they can like know what you're going on. You can also reach out to individuals directly. This is considered poor form some of the time, but sometimes it's not ready to really share with everyone, and you just want to run something by someone. And if you're in that stage, you can get the list of committers here and pick someone related to what you want to do. Yay, okay, so we're gonna go down the first adventure path of like trying to put something into Spark. Maybe we've got a bug and we wanna fix it. Has anyone run into any bugs with Spark? Okay, normally more hands would go up for that. Doesn't work very well. Maybe we've got a feature we want to add, right? Like maybe we want it to be like super awesome for a data center where we frequently lose half of our nodes, and it doesn't handle that case really well right now. So the first thing that we need to do to be good open source citizens in this respect is we really want to make sure that no one else is working on this right now, because it's considered like really poor form to sort of scoop someone else's project, right? And like think how sad you would be if someone at your job like showed up and like did all the work you were going to do, and you've been working on it for months and they just like never bothered telling you that they were like doing the same work as you, right? You'd be kind of sad. And the same thing happens in open source. So there's some things that we can do to see if anyone's working on it. If it's a really big thing, we can email the dev list. If it's a pretty small thing, we can search in Jira and try and find it. And if there is an issue associated with what we want to do, we can just leave a comment and be like, hey, is anyone working on this? I'd really love to work on this. And then if no one says anything, you're good to go. But often doing this can be awesome, especially if you're just starting. Because sometimes people will be like, oh, this is really cool. I've wanted to work on this, but I don't have the time. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. And then it's great, because you've just got someone to help you on your quest. And you're not going alone anymore, or only with stuffed animals. You have a human to help you. And they work better sometimes. So if anyone's planning on actually doing like a code contribution during this workshop, is anyone planning on doing that? Okay, never mind. So we could go ahead and get the code, but we can pretend we have the code too, and that's gonna work pretty well. Because we can actually just go to the GitHub, so it's github.com/apache/spark, and we can look at the code and we can search in the code for all of the same things we would do as if we had the code locally on our computers. Personally, I find working with it locally is a bit easier for me to figure out what I'm doing, but if you prefer the web interface, that'll work too. Awesome. So you can make a fork of it, and then you clone it locally, and it'll be fun. But I think we're gonna... How many people want me to just skip the exercises? No one. Wait, okay, how many people want to do the exercises was maybe a better question. Okay, 1, 2, okay. 4, that's good enough. Okay, so you can go here and you can fork Spark and you can make a clone of it locally. And then once you've got this going, you can start poking around in the code. And I think a really good first step is to try and build it, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes the version of Spark that you're going to find in the release, sorry, not in the release, in GitHub might be broken. They do their best to not have this happen, but it can be really frustrating when you like do this, you make a change, and then you're like, there's no way I could have broken this. What's going on? And normally that's because like I misunderstood something, but very rarely, sometimes it's that the original copy that I made was broken. And so you should check that it works locally first. Yeah, here's the little GitHub page and the fork button, and it's awesome. And if you want to git clone it, it's here. But we can also search inside of the repo on Git. And so we can search for things like to do, fix me, and broken, or why does this work? And we can find things that developers were confused about, but might not have bothered to put into like the official tracking system yet, because they're just like, oh, I'll get to this really soon. But normally that's from 2 years ago. So it's great because you can help out by like making sure it's in the official tracking system and like doing some initial investigation to help people like get along the way. And it's fun. So Jira, yay. For people that are more familiar with Bugzilla or FogBugs, you can think of it as that. You should sign up for an account because if you want to make changes to Spark, even documentation improvements, they require that it's associated with a Jira. And having an Apache Jira account is always just fun too. You can go and comment on other things that you find that are broken, even if you're not planning on fixing them, and be like, I encountered this problem too. I totally reproduced this problem in this version on my cluster, and that helps people. Yeah, so Spark is comprised of a whole bunch of different pieces. And we sort of need to pick the part that we care about, or like we're never gonna find the thing we actually wanna work on, right? Like trying to fix all of the things is just too much work, right? These things are far too many. I normally spend my time hanging out in like sort of the core and the Python part, because the Python people are really friendly and I like working with friendly people. So I encourage everyone to think about like, if you don't hate Python and you like Spark, you should totally consider working on Python Spark, because like you can work with me and we'll be friends and it'll be great. But like the other parts are good too, right? Like if like Python is just like not your jam, but you really care about streaming data, then like go ahead and work on streaming. The streaming people are there too. And yeah, that's true. And so one of the things that's sort of changed is that everything is moving on top of what's called Spark SQL, which is an interesting name for a system which doesn't do SQL, really. You can use it to do SQL, but now it's used for like functional transformations as well. And so I really think Spark SQL is cool, and if you want to contribute to it, certainly go for it. It's probably one of the more sort of like difficult places to get started. So I wouldn't like go for it unless I was being paid to do it. But like you might have a different objective function, so that's okay too, right? Like if like SQL systems or like really interesting type systems make you excited and happy, like Spark SQL can be a lot of fun because they're doing some really out there stuff with sort of types on their new dataset API. And it's cool. And so just a side note, because it seems like most people haven't worked with Spark, Spark SQL is really cool because it lets us intermix SQL expressions with our custom code, right? So if I'm a developer and I'm working with like a data scientist or an analyst, right? Like they might not be super comfortable writing Scala code, right? Like for them, their exploratory work might be a lot easier to do in SQL or in Python, right? And with the dataset API, I can take their exploratory work and I can sort of like piecemeal productionize it. I don't have to rewrite their entire thing. I can just be like, okay, this is the part that's really slow. So I'm gonna like have the SQL engine do this part, and I'll spend a bunch of time focused on this part, and then we'll go back and we'll like go back to the SQL engine and we can keep running their SQL expressions. And I think that's really powerful and cool, and it makes me honestly very excited in ways that only a nerd can get excited about SQL engines. And there's this, okay, so streaming SQL is also really cool, and you can do sort of like streaming aggregates using SQL expressions on data coming in. And it doesn't like work yet, in that I would not use it in production, but it's so incredibly exciting. Right now it only works with like sort of like HDFS inputs, so it's very limited to microbatching. But like if in the future, it'll probably get like Kafka support, and then we can start to do really cool things with streaming SQL expressions on top of Kafka streams. And like that's kind of cool. And if you want to work on that, there's a PR open right now for integrating Kafka into structured streaming. And there's a lot of interesting discussion. And if you know Kafka really well, you can certainly help out there. Buttons. Oh yeah, okay, some of my logos may, okay, yeah, whatever. So the Apache Software Foundation Jira encompasses like most of the Apache projects. And so this can be a little bit sort of confusing when you start searching for issues, because you'll be like, I want to work on SQL, and then you'll search for SQL, and you'll get a bunch of things back for like Hive or Scoop, and you'll be like, that's not Spark. So there's a filter mode, and you can select just the project you're interested in. You can create new issues. I like doing this for bugs that I find or bugs that people tell me about. because it makes them happy when I'm like, I made an issue. Normally doesn't mean we're getting to it very quickly, but it makes them happy, and that's a good start. And we might get to it eventually, right? Especially if other people show up later and are like, oh, I have the same issue. You can ask people for clarification, and you can even use some of the same syntax that you use on GitHub to ping people. Like, so the @mentions will ping people from Jira, and you can like @mention specific developers, and it's kind of cool. There are some things that unfortunately we can't do. So we can't assign issues to ourselves, and this is somewhat problematic because it means that it's difficult to tell who's working on an issue. Because like traditionally you would assign the issue to the person that's working on it, but we can't do that. So instead we just have to do it with like comments. So we leave a comment that says, hey, I want to work on this, or we leave a comment that says like, I tried working on this, but then I got stuck. I've got like some code here if anyone's interested, but like I'm done. I got burnt out working on this problem. It was boring. Long design documents should probably go to the dev list, and you can link to them certainly from Jira, but like don't post them as like a comment because no one's gonna read them. Yay, and here's Jira in all its funness. And we can see some random issues. One of them is called remove bagel. So that's like kind of fun. But we probably can't do that as like our first starter issue. We probably can't remove a whole subcomponent on our own. But we can probably look through and find some fun issues that we can work on. Yeah, so finding a starter issue. So there's explicit starter tags in Jira, and you can search for starter issues. Unfortunately, the developers that make the issues aren't always thinking in that mindset. So unless they're like being really conscious about it while they're creating the issues, they won't always tag a good starter issue as a starter issue. So unfortunately, for the most part, the problem is we just have to read through a lot of issues in Jira to pick out something that looks not too difficult. And I think, you know, if you were planning on doing something big, you should totally probably consider starting with something small, because like sometimes people show up with like 5,000 lines of code that does something really awesome, but because humans are humans, because they don't know the other person and they don't trust the other person, instead of it being super productive, it's just kind of like, I don't know who this person is, I'm not gonna read it. But if we fix a bunch of small things first, we can like build these relationships that we need to build. Yeah. Another really important thing to do is to look at the reporter of the issue. So does this thing go back? Huzzah! Okay. So the reporter field is really important because anyone can create an issue. And I'm not saying that issues from people that aren't committers are like bad issues, right? Obviously, I make issues and I'm not a committer, I'm just a contributor. But if you're looking for something that's going to be really easy to work on, if you find an issue that a committer cares about, then it's a lot easier to get someone to review it. And that's really important, right? You want someone who's really experienced with the project to be able to work alongside you. Yeah. Exercise 2. Okay, so if anyone is following along with the exercises, you can go to the issues.apache.org and you can search for some issues. Personally, I find a much easier way of finding starter issues if you like Python, and I'm not saying you have to, but if you like Python, you can look at the API documentations between Scala and Python, and you can find things that are missing. Normally they'll be missing in Python rather than Scala because the primary developers are really Scala first developers. And when you find missing things in Python, it's really good because there's an example of how to do it in Scala. The issue is just like figuring either how to call that from Python or figuring out how to port that over to Python. And like that's not like super exciting, like, oh my God, I solved this like really difficult problem. I'm a rock star, but we don't need that many rock stars. Like, there's way too many rock stars. We need a lot of people that like just make stuff work, right? And even then, right, like if you're working in a component related to what it is you eventually want to be like really, really awesome in, doing this wiring up will sort of help expose you to all of the pieces of code that are actually involved with making this thing function, right? Because I find like, if I just go, I want to read the Spark code this evening, right, with this glass of wine, what happens is I watch Netflix. And that's not really all that productive, except sometimes I watch Airplane Disasters, which is somewhat productive in the case my airplane like that I'm on ever crashes. I know what to do. But it doesn't help me contribute to Spark, right? But if I have like something to do, even if it's not like something I'm super excited about, having that like glass of wine or like cup of coffee and having this really simple problem to just sort of work on at the end of the day is a good way to actually force myself to go and read the code, because it has like a specific purpose rather than some vague general purpose. And for me personally, motivation-wise, that's like huge. For other people, you know, whatever. Buttons. So if you want to build Spark, once you've got the code, Spark can be built in two ways. There's SBT and Maven. Maven is what is used in production. SBT is what's used when you're a developer. And often these produce very similar artifacts. Very rarely do they produce different artifacts, and in that case, you really don't want to be the person that's trying to fix the build system inconsistencies between Maven and SBT. You do not want that skill. Trust me, you do not want to become that person. So just like move on. That's a good day to take a break and not work on Spark. So if you run into an issue which just shows up with one build tool, that's just like, that's a walk away day. And if you're working in Python, the one weird thing is like you're maybe like, I don't need to build the code, I'm working in Python. The only thing is the Python code sort of depends on the JVM code, so we still have to build our code. And it's important that we remember to build our code again fresh every time we update from Spark, because the Python code can change, and if we have new Python code calling oldly compiled Java code, that goes about as well as it sounds, right? It's just, we're gonna get incomprehensible errors and pull our hair out. And I think the fastest way to sort of verify that your build is like reasonable is to just start up the Spark shell. So once you've run the build command, you can just go like /bin/spark-shell, and it'll just start up. And if it doesn't give you too many error messages, you're good. If there's a whole bunch of info, warning, and it says some weird stuff about Hadoop utils, you can just ignore that. You can also change your log level if you want, but for the purposes of just like verifying your build, you can be like, no, that's cool. It works. I'm gonna like do the word count example, make sure word count works, and then you can be like, okay, I have a good build. I'm gonna go on and do my thing. Yay. Okay, so documentation changes, right? We don't have to build the code for documentation changes, which is nice. We still have to use JIRAs to track them, and one place where we can't make changes, strangely enough, is the wiki, which is locked down, and so it's really not a wiki. But it's okay. If you check out the Spark code, inside of the folder called docs, there's a whole bunch of markdown files, and these files consist of the documentation for us. We still need to verify, we still need to verify that our changes build, because what happens is it takes the markdown and it compiles it into the website, and we can write invalid markdown, right? Or the markdown we write might not do what we're expecting. I've certainly done that. And the docs readme.md file will sort of walk you through building it, but the like 30-second version is you type this command, and then you type the second command, and then it'll tell you there's a URL that you can go to, and you go there and you see the documentation, and you're like, this looks right, or this looks wrong. And if it looks wrong, it's okay, you can just go back, and you can edit the file, and at least half of the time it'll pick up your changes automatically, and the other half it won't, and you'll just like stop the process and start it over again. Huzzah! Finding your way around the code. I am someone that uses Emacs to work on Java code because I hate my fingers, and autocomplete seems like the witch's tools, sorry. But IntelliJ is really popular. Some people use Eclipse. It doesn't integrate as nicely with the Spark project as IntelliJ does for reasons that, as someone that doesn't use it, I've never bothered to figure out. So if you're like thinking about using an IDE or a tool to work with Spark, I think getting IntelliJ, there's a free version, you don't have to give them money, is really good. If you're really like Emacs, you can do it too. If you like Notepad or VI or even Ed, you can edit Spark in Ed and it'll work. The code is organized into different subprojects. So if you're interested in working in SQL, you go into the SQL directory. If you're interested in working in core, it gets a little bit more confusing. You go into core, or you go into common, or you go into network. That's just kind of unfortunate, but it's okay. There's like 3 directories you go into. And are there any Python users? 3, you go into the Python directory and we become friends. And you can go into the Python directory and you can just start going around and looking at the files. That's really cool. One of the important things to do before you get like overly excited and try and fix the issue is make sure that it's still an issue. And I'm not like a test-driven first development person. Like I'm not going to tell you you have to write like a giant unit test before you can go ahead and start writing your fix. But like just try and reproduce it in the Spark shell first. The Spark shell is really awesome. There's a Python, R, and Scala version, and you can just like put your code in there and it'll run. By default, it runs like a little fake cluster on your laptop. So that's really convenient. You don't even have to set up a cluster for testing most of the time to verify the issues. You get a free little fake cluster. And if you can verify the issue, that's great, go ahead. There's a few different ways to add tests in Spark. If you're in Python, there's doc tests and the tests thing. It's unit tests 2 for some reason. And in Scala, it's mostly, actually, it's a mixture of things in Scala, but it all lives under src project name test rather than src project name main. And you should go and write your test. So now we have like some code working, or we've like verified the issue. Before we get like super excited and start sending out pull requests, we have a style guide. And the style guide is a little counterintuitive to people coming from other projects sometimes. In part because the Python code reads kind of like Scala code. So like underscores, no. Camel case, yes, okay. But so read the style guide because there are sort of standard assumptions that you would make about how the code's going to be organized that just aren't going to hold true. Please always add tests. If you don't add it initially, someone will make you add them later. So you should do it first anyways because it's good practice. Running your tests is complicated, unfortunately. In Python, you can just run Python run tests and it'll run the entire test suite. And for Python, that's almost reasonable. It doesn't take too long. Running the entire test suite for Scala takes a really long time, so you probably want to use the test-only mode, and you can specify like which specific test you've added, and then it'll go a little bit better. So the binary compatibility checker is called MIMA. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can add exclusions to MIMA, and actually when it gives you an error message, it'll tell you like exactly the exclusion text to paste into its little exclusion thing. Don't just do that without first checking that it's actually wrong. It does get things wrong pretty frequently, so it's not like don't be worried about it. And if you have any questions, like you can always like add the exclusion and like have a comment next to it that says like, I don't know if this exclusion is correct, can like someone tell me? And like someone will help you out with the binary compatibility part. Yeah, okay, cool. Nyan cat, kitty. So this was gonna be the part where we were gonna make our code changes, but we can also make documentation changes And we can also not do that for most of the people. But hopefully later on, you'll go home and be like, you know what? I want to contribute to Spark. I'm going to go and start updating some of the documentation. And that'll be great. I think GitHub searching inside the project is actually really cool, just because it's really easy. And I also use grep a lot because I don't like changing my tools. But if you're like one of those fancy people, IntelliJ is really much nicer. Okay, cool. So let's say hypothetically we've gone home and we've made our change, and like we made a test, and we're like, okay, I've got something. It's ready to go. What's your next step? So we're going to make a pull request. You're going to push it to your own repo, and then when you go to GitHub, if you go back to your project, there will be a little thing that's like, hey, what's up? Are you trying to like make a pull request? Like, I'll help you out with that. And then you're like, yeah, GitHub, that's awesome. And you'll click the button, and it'll be like, boop. Doesn't make the sound. And it'll give you this PR. You really want to put the JIRA name in the title of the PR because there's some scripts that are used to sort of allow the committers and reviewers to track what's going on, and they depend on that. If you mention the name of the component as well, some people are subscribed to the mailing list, and when they see a new JIRA that's in a component they care about, or sorry, a new pull request in a component they care about, they'll go and they'll read it. And so that's good, so you should mention the component. If it's your first pull request, the test won't start automatically. Spark has this really big test suite, including the test that we talked about running locally. It'll test a whole bunch of other stuff, like it has some Docker-based integration testing that's really cool that you probably like don't want to bother doing on your laptop, or at least I don't. And what'll happen is a little bot will leave a comment that says, can an admin verify this? And someone will go, yeah, this looks like it's not trying to delete all of our source code or steal our AWS credentials. Go ahead and run the tests, right? If you're like really not certain about what you're doing, you can make a PR and you just put work in progress in the title. And I think a lot of people are like a little bit too cautious about that. They're like, I don't know if I should put work in progress there. So if you're like on the fence, I wouldn't include it. But if you're like, yeah, I need someone's advice, and like you don't have like a solution, but you have something you want some feedback on, then work in progress or RFC is good practice. And we got a happy kitty because we made a pull request. And now we get to code review time, where things are awesome. Damn recording. So I think code reviews should be done in the open. For projects like Spark, this doesn't always happen. Some of the companies involved in working on Spark just elect to not do that process. Because they don't have to. And essentially, they'll review their code in-house, and then they'll show up and make a pull request afterwards, and then they'll just like merge it right away. And I don't think that's like a great thing to do. I think that's kind of bad, because while you might have you have permission to merge it because a committer has like looked at it and signed off on it, you've like sort of cut the rest of the community out of the process. And if the community is like terrible, then like, yeah, okay, sure, like cut the community out. But like, I like to think we're not terrible people. I have Boo, she's lovely. Like, the community can be helpful and give you good feedback that you might not have thought of. And so I think doing it in the open is really important. The cool thing about all of us is we don't really have a choice anyways, unless like you start working at one of the companies with a bunch of committers, like we have to do it in the open. But like if you're at one of those companies which sometimes just goes and does it on their own, like, I mean, obviously do what your boss tells you so you can keep getting paid, because paying rent is really rather important, much more so than like open source politics. Most often, someone will come along and review your code. And it's important to understand that not just committers will review your code. Other people like me who have like a little bit too much free time on our hands will show up and be like, oh my God, you use Python? I use Python. We should be friends. And by the way, they want camel case here. And like, have you thought about like, maybe we can do this like without iterating over it twice and we can be friends. But the cool thing about people like me is you don't have to listen to us. I think it's like friendly and you should like listen to everyone if they're not being like mean. But like if someone shows up and makes some like silly comments and they're not a committer, you can like kind of just be like, that doesn't sound like a thing I want to do. But if a committer shows up and makes silly comments, there's like not a lot of other options because the committer will probably just be like, no. But the committers normally know what they're doing, so they don't like make said silly comments. It's much better. If no one's like looking at your pull request, you can check the release schedule. Close to releases, people actually start to review a lot of code. And so if like you're not getting any traction, you can be like, okay, like this maybe like isn't a big thing and it's not super important, but like I'll like come back in a few weeks when it's getting close to the next release and see if someone like can take a look and maybe get this in with some other small fixes. You can try pinging people. Don't like ping everyone, right? Like that's just gonna go poorly. They'll get annoyed for their email spam. But you can always ping me, and I promise to not get annoyed. I'm really friendly, and I have Boo if I'm ever frustrated. I can just talk to Boo about my frustrations. You can also ping the author of the JIRA. You don't have to limit yourself to committers. And even if they're not a committer, it can be really good because they often like really care about this problem or this solution. So they'll give you good feedback, right? Or even if they're like not a developer and they just like ran into this problem, they'll often be really excited about trying to get the fix in. And so they might like help you try and find the people that can get the changes in. So I think you should always like ping the author or the shepherd of the JIRA. Git blame is also your friend. You can use it to figure out who like wrote the code you're fixing. And you can ping them and be like, yo, what's up? I fixed your bugs. Or like, yo, what's up? Your code is awesome. I added some features to it. We should be friends. And most of the time, they won't become your friends. It's kind of sad. But they'll probably, you know, at least take a look at your code. As you can tell, my life is very much based around like friendly people, and it doesn't always work out. Okay, so what does the review process itself look like? If you're like really lucky, someone shows up and they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, LGTM. And that's just like, yeah, +1, this is good. Sounds good to me is like, I like the sounds of what you're saying, but like, I'm not like ready to sign off on this code, but I like your approach, like this is awesome, keep going. Sometimes they'll be like, this is cool, thank you so much for trying, but like we kind of want to go about this in a different way. And the nice thing is they'll normally take the time to tell you like what this different way vaguely is. Especially in Python or ML, the reviewers there tend to give more actionable feedback in my experience. Sometimes your PR just doesn't get in. And if no one shows up to review it, the unfortunate habit of the Spark community in some components is their way of saying no is just like not saying anything. And so like if you don't hear from them like after 3 calls, it's time to stop calling and move on. Find another issue and work on that. You can also like ask me like what's going on, and I can like maybe take a look and try and like give you a guess as to why they're maybe not interested. But if like it's in a component that I haven't touched, like it'll be very guessy and less useful. So let's look at an actual review of a relatively simple change. So this is making it so that Spark could support switching in between Yarn and non-Yarn deployments without restarting the JVM, which is pretty much never used, except if you're testing. In some test environments, you actually like would want to test in sort of like a simulated cluster mode, and then some of your other tests you would want to test in like a local mode. And if your simulated cluster is in Yarn, then you might want to switch between the two. So this pull request like doesn't accomplish much useful. And all told, it involves like 34 additions and 16 subtractions. Let's see how many slides it takes to get it merged. Huzzah. Okay, so bad start. The first thing that I forgot to do is I forgot to like really check to make sure that my code fit the style guide. That's on me. So like the Spark bot is like, yo, Holden, you should have checked this. The style guide, we have an automated checker for much of it. And it's like, okay, I'll go and fix that. Sean shows up and he's like, awesome, this looks really cool, looks good to me, just like add this space here and we'll be good. And that's like super exciting. I'm like, oh my God, looks good to me, looks good to me, looks good to me. My code's gonna get merged. And then I'm like, wait, there's more comments. Oh, okay. So I'm like, okay. I'll do like the thing Sean told me to do, and then it'll get merged, right? It'll get merged. And then like this other person shows up and is like, oh hey, yo, there's some things you didn't think about. You should fix those too. And I'm like, oh yeah, crap, I should fix those too. So then we chat for a while, and I'm like, okay, cool. I forgot this thing was a public API. I'm gonna go fix that. So then we do that, and then he's like, awesome, thanks for trying. Move it up a line. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. Put it in finally block, looks good to me, 2 minor things. I'm really excited again. It's like, okay, and now this time my excitement was correct, yay! The code gets merged. So that's a pretty standard small PR. Oh man, there was a really cool cat picture here. Sad. Okay, there was a cat and it was inside of a cat carrying case and it looked a little bit pissed off. But really the takeaway is like, don't get discouraged from comments on your PR, right? Sometimes, like these two people are really good reviewers and they phrase their things really nicely. Not everyone in the Spark community has those skills, unfortunately, and will sometimes phrase things in like kind of frustrating ways. And I'm like, I'm going for a walk, and then I'm coming back to my computer afterwards and keeping working on this. Review cycles are kind of long, so don't like spend your entire day waiting for someone to get back to you. Just like go ahead and move on. Really big PRs can take a lot longer. There's a PR to make PySpark pip installable. It has like over 10 reviewers, and I'm pretty sure that pull request started sometime last year and still has not yet been merged. But like it's a thing that people actually want, so it might happen. Oh yeah, okay, wait, no, here's the cat. Here's the slightly pissed off cat. So like, it's okay. Sometimes, even though it's bad form, people will scoop your pull requests. You can leave like a semi-passive aggressive comment and be like, oh hey, I was working on this too, but I like your approach. But if instead of being passive aggressive, you're like, oh hey, cool, I was working on this too. Like these are some of the things I came up with. Like maybe we can find a way to like work together to make this more awesome. Then like sometimes the person will be like, oh, I'm so sorry, thank you for like offering to collaborate, let's work together. And then both of you can make the change together and it'll be awesome. Sometimes people aren't friendly though, because it's the internet. Yeah, so there's an automated pull request builder. It does way more tests than we would normally run on our laptop. The test logs live on, and this is really useful if you're trying to sort of figure out if the test you're like having fail is like something that you did, or if it's just kind of like a flaky test. You can go and be like, did this test fail like frequently? You can go and just take a look and be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is just kind of junk. I'll ignore it for now and get back to it later. I think it still lives in Berkeley. I'm not super sure where the computer lives anymore, but I'm sure it's in a very nice air-conditioned room and it's enjoying its time there. If you're doing like a really big change, or if you're like trying to make Spark go like vroom vroom, if you want to like make Spark go faster, there's Spark perf that they'll ask you to run, and this just like lets you test that your performance improvement is actually a performance improvement, because sometimes you'll be like, oh man, I'm gonna make it go super vroom vroom, and you're like, I made it slower, and then your change doesn't get merged in. But you can test it yourself before you like go and share. Similar things happen with SQL. There's some SQL performance tests that they'll ask you to run. While you're waiting, it's really important to keep, so I'm a bad person. When it comes to Git, I merge master in as opposed to rebasing on master, which I'm told is bad. People get upset with me, but not in Spark because all of our commits get squashed down, so it doesn't matter. But essentially, what you should do is like every few days, like go check out the latest version of Spark, and then you can like check out your branch, and then you can go git merge master, and then you do git push, and it'll update your pull request with the latest version of the core-based Spark code. And this is useful because Spark changes really quickly, and also it keeps your pull request at the top of this like dashboard that people are looking at, so it's more likely for people to notice your changes. If your pull request gets really like old, it might just get auto-closed. Cool, starter issues, mailing lists, Stack Overflow, APIs. I really want the Python people to be my friends, please. If anyone works with customers or users, sometimes they ask you to fix things, and that can be great. Talking with the community is really important for big changes. Design docs. Google Docs are pretty common. If you really don't want people to give you feedback easily, you can make it a PDF. I think that's kind of counterproductive, but some people are just like, no, it's cool. You got a PDF. And if you're making something big, often the really big things you can publish on your own as a Spark package, and someday you can maybe get it merged in later, but you can sort of do development sort of outside of Spark and make it move forward without waiting on this review process. There's a really nice-ish wiki document about contributing to Spark that I can't update and none of us can, which is frustrating. But it's there and you can read it. I kind of recommend it. The programming guide is probably really useful for people that are new to Spark, because trying to make changes to a system that you don't understand is like totally doable, as evidenced by my like D in my, I think an operating systems class or something. But like you can do it, but like that was a D. That was not a good grade. So you might be able to do slightly better if you take some time to sort of review the documentation first and then make your changes. I also think like Learning Spark is a pretty good book, but I'm a co-author, so I'm obviously really biased, so you can kind of ignore that part. But if you have a Safari subscription, it's free, so check it out. Creating packages is really cool. If you want to do that, I have a testing package that I think is an okay example, and you can sort of use that as a starting point. And you can build your own package, like just look at the build that it does and sort of copy it and change the name from Holden-testing to like whatever your name is -awesome. Yeah. You have to have the SBT PGP plugin installed if you're building with SBT, and this thing will occasionally behave really, really weirdly. It's not you, it's the software. So if it's behaving really weirdly, just try randomly reconfiguring it until it works. That's what I did. And eventually it sort of worked, and I'm not touching that again, ever. Yeah. If anyone's interested in like connecting to a different input format, so if you have like some custom formats in your company, those can do a really good job as Spark packages as opposed to trying to get them into Spark itself. If you want to like build some monitoring tools or deployment tools, those are much better as packages too. If you want to write a book and make less than minimum wage, let's hang out. And you can write a book about Spark, and you can do that. There's a bunch of publishers looking to have more Spark books written, and if you're interested in talking with them, I can totally introduce you. But like, if you want to write about something that's not Spark, that might be like also pretty happy too. Another interesting thing is some of the Spark books are kind of like orphans, and this is very sad. They're all alone, and no one's caring for them or updating them to the new APIs. And you can go to a publisher and be like, I really like this book, but it's so old and it needs someone to help it. I'll bring it some coffee. And they'll be like, tell me how much you would charge for this coffee. And at that point, you can start negotiating and you can update one of the books. And I think it's a pretty good way to sort of like half write a book and half like not have to do everything. Or if you can trick a co-author into working with you, it's a great way to spread the misery around. Sorry, my cynicism sometimes shows through. For people that are like completely new to Spark, if this talk didn't turn you off Spark, Paco Nathan has a really wonderful introduction to Spark video. And You can get it for free on YouTube, and I say this as someone who has her own introduction to Spark videos. So like Paco's is pretty legit. I highly recommend it, and he's also very entertaining. So I think it's wonderful. But I also have some of my own Spark videos. If you're really like a Python person and super excited about it, I have one using Python and some of the same cat pictures from these slides. So that's transferable cat knowledge. And then there's the Apache Spark YouTube channel, which can be sort of interesting if you're like interested in seeing what's happening in the Spark community, but like maybe not ready to go and write a bunch of code today, right? You can go and see what the latest things are happening there. There's books. Oh dear. It's okay, boo. You can buy them. Okay, and I'm also going to tell you not to buy one of my books, even though it gets me the most money. Do not buy Fast Data Processing with Spark. It is incredibly out of date, and the publisher keeps selling it. But, I mean, if you have a corporate expense account and hate trees, you can buy it, but like otherwise, please don't. Trees are our friends. Okay, cool. Other books, yay. Ooh, that's animated. Yeah, there's another book. If anyone's interested in Spark Performance, you can buy that one, and I get money. So it's a great gift for friends, family, dogs, cats. Everyone will love high-performance Spark, especially if you have a corporate expense account. It is the gift of the season. Your clients will love it. Just like the cats will love it thing from Amazon. I should put that picture there. Okay, cool. Yay, I'm here. I'm giving a talk. If anyone's like New York based, I'll be giving a talk on how to make Spark's new streaming thing work with machine learning in New York next week on Thursday or something. I'm a little fuzzy. And then PyData DC, if anyone's DC based, Salt Lake City. If anyone has an expense account and wants to go to London and you need an excuse and you work with Spark, you can come and see this same talk again in London. So that'll be exciting. Maybe don't mention that part to your boss when you're asking for approval. But there's also Strata Singapore, which is another lovely place to go when you have an expense account. So if you want to join me at any of these places on your expense account, please invite me out for coffee. My expense account does not cover food. But more seriously, thank you. I'm sorry that the exercises were maybe not super well suited for everyone, but I hope this was useful for people. If there's questions, I don't know how much time I have. Probably a lot because we didn't do the exercises. I'm more than happy to answer questions, or we can just leave this picture of a bunny up here. Her name is Bun Bun. She likes eating lettuce and working on computers. So yeah, that's about it. Are there any like questions? No. Okay, cool. Come find me if you've got questions later. Thank you so much for coming to this talk. Yeah.